Welcome to another episode of Breaching the Boardroom. I am your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today is former security analyst with the NSA and security researcher and senior security analyst with Analyst One, John DiMaggio. John, welcome to the studio, my friend.
It's good to be back. I've been on, there's no other show I've been on as much as your guys, so I appreciate the love and you guys having me back again.
Well, you're always welcome. You're definitely a friend of the show, and I'm just telling you, if cybercrime's up, so it tends to be something that we need to keep bringing you back because we're like,
Right.
what is going on with this? And we've seen
won.
a lot of.
You mean it's not over?
Yeah, I thought we won. Isn't it over? Is it mission accomplished? Right?
There was an executive order yesterday, man. We got it.
Yes, I saw it. Yeah, I thought they outlawed cybercrime. Aren't we done with this podcast already?
That's right. It's against the law, man. No more law for me.
So let's back up a little bit. So walk everybody through a little bit about your history, because for those that may not be aware of who you are and where you came from, I think that'd be interesting for everybody.
Sure. Former military police, former SIGINT analyst with the NSA, as well as some other government agencies over my career. Last, I don't know, 10 years or so, I've been in the private sector. I specialized in espionage when I was in the government, and I did that for Symantec as well in the private sector side for many years. And at Analyst One, around 2020, I dove into cybercrime, and I really got into humans, which is human intelligence, which is virtual human in this case, where you pretend to be other people, or sometimes you're yourself, and engage with criminals trying to extract intelligence, get information, combine that with CTI, and I write reports. Probably the most known report series that I've written is the Ransomware Diaries, which is something I spend a lot of time doing. Probably going to take a break here for the next 6 months on that and do some other projects, but that's definitely my baby.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite things. Like whenever I'm trying to explain to anybody how the ransomware enterprise works, because it's big business, right? And how and why they do what they do, and understanding the modus operandi. I kind of refer to that quite often. So let's talk about there've been a lot of ransomware attacks. Obviously, they're always in the news. They didn't always used to be in the news. So before, 15 years ago, it was very rare to see them in the news. It was really it seems to me like, and I could be wrong, but it seems to me between 2011, 2013, cybercriminals started to productize their offerings. And then they started to, it almost morphed from everybody's view of what a hacker is, like a kid in a hoodie, cracking Red Bull, in their mom's basement, creating all this complicated code. And Hollywood has portrayed them as being these cool geniuses and stuff. But it really changed, and we started to see it more in the news when they started to just write the code and create a platform, essentially, and then license that platform or licensed access to the code to just anybody that was criminal. And then it kind of exploded because there's a lot more criminals than there are people with technical ability. Walk us through, what did you see just high level over the last 15 years? Is that kind of your understanding? Is that a good kind of summary or recap of what we've seen, why it's gotten so popular?
So I guess let me walk back, and we'll just do a brief summary on that timeline. So yes, in that timeline, we did see, I guess the first time we started seeing it being used to encrypt enterprises was the Business Club with CryptoLocker. But it wasn't that they were locking down the whole enterprise and using it quite as the same as we see today. But that was sort of the seed being planted. And when it really took off was in 2015 when SamSam ransomware became prevalent, and that ended up being attributed back to Iran. It was a couple of Iranian guys that put that together. And then I would say a few years later, maybe I want to say around 2018, 2019 timeframe, we started to see the first ransomware-as-a-service model. I might be off a little bit on those last dates. It kind of blends in with the doing this every day. But yeah, somewhere around that time frame. And that model is really sparked. And if people don't know what that is, ransomware as a service is a partnership. It's sort of like a service partner model. So think about
it's like a managed service almost, right? Yeah,
I mean, correct. Yes, you pay for the software, the infrastructure, and that the service provider, who would be the ransomware gang, they provide all those resources. You, as the hacker, go and use their tools and resources to compromise and extort victims, and then the two entities share in the profits, or at least that's how it's supposed to work. Criminals aren't the most trustworthy people, so it often goes bad, and then the drama breaks out, and then we have the ransomware diaries.
Right. Exactly. So ransomware as a service is a service model where, just to recap, where the developers of the code, the first group, the technical group, or the criminal enterprise, that's like the council or the senior. When you do an analogy to the mafia, it's like the management. It's all the dons.
Your leadership. Exactly.
It's all the heads of the families that kind of have that. Right. So they control things, and then they have different, digital mercenaries, that affiliates that will go out and do the dirty work, and they don't necessarily know other people that are involved, so that if they get caught, there's really not much they can show sometimes, depending on how much buffer they have.
And yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No. Please.
I just wanted to add one little thing to that. In this mafia model, since I love the Godfather movies, the ransomware as a service provider, they build and equip you with a gun, if you will. So they build what's called a ransomware builder, which is what creates a payload that has a decryption key. And they use that, or it has a key, and they use that, and it's different for each attack that they do. Yes, and that key is what the victim is paying to get back. So they provide that builder. They develop the ransomware. They provide the infrastructure. Oftentimes they'll provide tools to steal data or whatever it might be. They provide what's called the data leak site, or DLS, which is where victim data is posted, and it's all done through a nice graphical interface. You get the data. It shows up on the platform when you use their tool. You start the timer. When the timer is up, the data is leaked, or they pay and you stop the timer and it's not leaked. It sounds simple, but it's not quite that simple, but that's basically how it works.
So when a criminal enterprise breaches an organization, they'll either encrypt the data, right, launch the ransomware, or they'll exfiltrate the data, they'll take it, and then they'll use both of those. It's like a double extortion, right, to kind of blackmail them into paying for either unencrypting the data and give them the decrypt key, or even sometimes if they don't encrypt, we're still going to publicize it, right? And that's what's done on the leak site.
That's right. And the data, stealing data and extorting them for data has become more and more prevalent. We even see some that are just doing that. But I would say that the encrypting victim systems fall secondary to that as far as getting victims to pay, because data is far more sensitive. And with your systems, you can rebuild. You can't get that. You can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. You can't get the data back once it's released publicly or sold to criminals.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you this. How, in generally speaking, there's a million different ways, of course, but in general, overall, how are these affiliates, the actual hackers, the criminal digital mercenaries, how are they getting into some of these organizations? Because sometimes I hear a lot of times it's through phishing, or it's a combination. It's clearly a combination of different tactics, but there's phishing, there's social engineering, which we talk about all the time. But oftentimes they'll buy access through like initial access brokers. Can you walk us through that and what that is?
Yeah, so access brokers, basically they are hackers that go out and they compromise the organization. They silently gain access, but they don't do much when they're in, because they don't want to be identified. They gain that access, they might escalate, or usually they'll try to escalate their privileges, so get administrative privileges, because they can sell the access for more if they have that. And then they go to usually underground dark web forums. Sometimes you'll see it on Telegram, but they'll go and they'll sell this access, and ransomware bad guys are one of their top customers. The other model is where the hackers have to breach the system themselves. And something you said, it does happen a lot with phishing emails and things like that. But what, at least from the bad guys who I talk to over, say, the past 2 years, I've seen more and more sort of the preference of a lot of these adversaries is to look for infrastructure that hasn't been patched, that's not secure, or that has a new exploit for it, and or an old one if its company still hasn't patched it. And that's how they gain access, is through infrastructure. And it kills me when it's things that all they had to do was update and patch their equipment, and this would have mitigated it, and they don't. But that's becoming, they scan, they look, and they gain access, and they don't even have to bother with the phishing emails. But that does still take place, but I'm seeing more and more of that.
Well, it's really shocking too. Like you'd think that a lot of these organizations, that everybody's doing, like they have the people in place, or they have the companies in place to do the patching, and it just isn't done. And it's just it's a non-updated patching, or it's on such a delay for the patching that it doesn't get done, and it gets taken advantage of. It's just absolutely shocking.
It does. And to be fair, a lot of these companies, especially larger companies, they have a concern about just patching something on how it will affect other servers and the software that they have, so they're slower to do it.
Great.
The times have changed.
Sometimes when you patch, you break things. You break other things.
That's right.
Because of configurations, right?
Yes. But times have changed, and the risk associated with doing that, my opinion, is far greater. I feel like it's better to have something break and have an outage than it would be to have your data leaked and you're owned and compromised and all your systems are encrypted. So they're rolling the dice, and when they do that, but that's just the world that we live in, is it takes time sometimes for organizations to update. And I get that, but when there's also organizations that they don't even know what they have out there, and they don't patch it. And one of the big ones, and I think I used this example previously, but was with the subcontractor that led to the breach of SpaceX. That subcontractor had public-facing equipment, so stuff that's available to access from the internet, and it still had default passwords that come when it's out of the box from the vendor, and they just walked right in. So that's type of stuff, there's no excuse for. That's right.
Well, you see that a lot with Internet of Things devices, right? Like the smart refrigerators, the smart other devices, the doorbells, like you name it. My favorite aisle on Best Buy. And like the security out of the box is like admin 1, 2, 3. And everybody knows what it is, and yet nobody goes to the panel to reset that to a actual password.
That's right. And they don't make it very easy. Let's say you're a small business. They don't make it very easy to seclude those. Like I do it in my own, my home network is set up with, I have a work network that uses business level grade equipment. And even with that, I have to have a separate network in my house. I have to have 3. I have to have a separate to put all of those devices outside of the network that I use, because some of them, it's very difficult, or you need to have access to them. You can't have cameras or doorbell and turn off the Wi-Fi for it. Now, your refrigerators, your toaster, your washer, your dryer, all those easy, just block them, turn them off. For me, anyway, I think it's not worth the risk. But there's others where you just have to have that. So they make it difficult, is my point, for consumers, small businesses. Larger businesses have the engineering, they have the money, they have the equipment that make it a little bit easier. But yeah, it's definitely a problem.
Let me ask you this: there's so many reports where the affiliates or certain types of threat actors are getting in networks and staying in there undetected. They're able to move laterally. They're able to escalate privileges. Why are organizations not able to see that stuff?
One of the reasons is because a lot of these adversaries, they gain access and then they use what's called living off the land techniques. So they don't actually bring in malware. They'll use services that are implemented for other purposes, like to administrate your network, but they'll use it in malicious means in order to continue to gain that access. And then they download tools once they've escalated their privileges, and they have a hold on the network, and they can turn off security appliances. I'll never forget the first time. This was like 2018. The first time I saw an adversary turn off an EDR service on a victim's environment on their systems, and it was it was crazy to me that they were able to gain privileges high enough to do that. But it happens.
So they were able to go in and turn off the endpoint detection and response
That's
on the
right.
service.
Yes,
It's
yes,
impressive.
which is just crazy. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's hard to believe they can do that. But to answer your question on why they're not, a lot of companies don't detect this, honestly, it's so difficult to do. So you've got to have the money invested in it, because you have to have something like an EDR. That's, in my opinion, the number one way to help prevent that, is having a
or
good
a
EDR. But two,
SIM, or
well, and then threat hunters, you need the humans to be able to go in and
Mhm.
identify false positives, or look at the stuff that isn't a red flag, but is just suspicious, because these guys are creative and they're constantly coming up with new ways to get on your networks. And, I harp on this when I teach courses and things, but as a security analyst, you cannot sit there and wait for something to tell you that something's bad. You're never going to be able to find new threats that are going to be present in your environment. You got to go look for it. You got to look at the stuff that's suspicious, that's not necessarily flashing red screens. Hey, this is bad. It's not always going to work out that way. So you got to be creative. You got to be passionate. You got to go look for this stuff. You got to take that extra step.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot in the SMB space. I hear a lot. Well, we've got an IT company, and they're monitoring my network, so I feel okay, and I'm like, but they're not doing SIM, or they're not doing EDR. They're not monitoring the network looking for security risks. They're monitoring it for health of the device, disk space, for in order to patch. They're not
That's right.
they're looking at the same technology but for different things. Their job in the IT support range is to keep you productive, keep things going. They're monitoring whether you're online or offline, that type of thing. It's the security teams that are the SOCs versus the NOCs that are monitoring for anomalies, looking for escalated privileges, looking for intrusions or data loss, things like that.
That's right. And that's also why, one of the sort of a rule of thumb is the more secure you are, the less ease of use your environment's going to be. And many of these organizations, especially ones that cater to services where it needs to be easy for people to use and access, they have to weigh those decisions, making it more secure and a little harder for people to use, or being more secure. And that's why one of the reasons why education and academic organizations are such, and healthcare are such big targets, is because those all have to be available and timely to the customer base that they serve. And that makes them right targets for ransomware bad guys.
Yeah. And to me, also, I mean, just from a high level, it seems like years ago we had two versions of our world. Like we were able to, we had computers in the office, but we were still able to conduct sales, make payroll, engage with customers, render medical care, and do all these things without technology. We could use technology. It was like an electronic version. It might speed things up, but if it went down, we could still function. But ever since like all the vendors got everybody to scan all their files and digitize everything, and now everything is digitally transformed. Now, when something goes down, like last time, if anybody's been to a physician lately, right? Like the nurse doesn't come in with a freaking big pad of paper and go, well, here's all your medical records. Let me see how you're doing, right? It's all on a tablet. It's all connected to their systems. And so when those systems are down, they can't render medical care because they don't know your history. They can't see it. Like they can't access stuff.
That's right.
So
honestly,
it seems to me,
more secure then. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me, therefore, the effect that the cyber criminals are having is worse today than it was before. Because before we could still function.
100%. 100%. I'm going to sound like a boomer here, but critical services, critical infrastructure, secret squirrel government stuff, your healthcare, like all of that would be so much more secure, not as ease of use, but it would be so much more secure if we still use those models. Honestly, like let's use the healthcare for an example. This will never happen but I would much rather that I'm responsible for my data. And when you need my medical data, I give that to you when I go to a physician or something. To me, I would rather that's on me, because other people clearly can't protect my data and we're helpless. There's nothing we can do. You can't say, no, I'm not going to let you treat me today because I don't want my data being out there. But there's nothing that you can do. I mean, just sending a message to your doctor, it's permanently there on your record when you go to these portals. I mean, everything's there. So you have no control of it, and you have to hope that these third parties are gonna protect you. And we know from the reading headlines every day, it's often not the case.
Unbelievable. So when we're talking about ransomware as a service, some of these platforms, now in your role, I said like 5 thoughts at once, so hang on with me. So in your role, you have done things like gone undercover and spoken to like Russian ransomware gangs. That's really amazing. My question is, these gangs, like, how are they not arrested? I know the answer, but I want you to explain it. Like, how are they not, like, how can they bankrupt a hospital or bankrupt a manufacturing company in Kentucky or Illinois and have no consequence? Like, and they make tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, and the business is just destroyed, right? And then they leak it, and then they go to the press, or if there's compliance, they notify the SEC, they notify HHS. Like, they're really terrorizing small to mid-sized businesses in the U.S. How can they get away with it? It's like they operate with impunity.
Yeah. Well, the reason that they get away with it is, at least today, the majority of ransomware attacks that we see in the U.S. originate from Russia, the Ukraine, that general region, but primarily Russia. And the issue that we have is, obviously, Russia is not friendly with the U.S., and they provide sort of protection. It's laughable if we were to try to extradite someone from Russia, they wouldn't even entertain it. So these guys, they have sort of protection as long as they don't do attacks that would take place against Russian entities. So that provides them the ability that even when we indict them, they're not arrested. They can't be turned over to the U.S. They will never be charged unless they screw up and leave and get caught in a country that will extradite them. So it's usually
only if they make a connecting flight through like Miami that we can get them, right? Or through Canada or something, right? Like that's the only way.
There's places or the UK or somewhere like that. Absolutely, you're correct on that. Now, I will say that we are seeing an uptick in ransomware attacks that do come from other regions of the world. There's been an uptick of seeing ransomware attacks coming out of China and places like that. But still, by far, Russia, that general region is the most prevalent for ransomware attack origins.
So they operate with impunity, and then they're not able to be arrested, and really the country that they live in is happy because you just brought in millions of dollars of revenue that otherwise would not be coming to the country, and you're going to go spend that in their cities.
That's right. Well, not just that. One of the things, and I know this firsthand from the relationships that I've had with bad guys, when they get indicted, often they get a visit from the FSB. And I've even seen, and I'm not going to say any names, just because I don't.
So the FSB, for those who don't know, is the Russian, kind of the old KGB in a sense, the Russian FBI. It's the Russian senior federal police, basically.
That's right. That's right. And often it's very corrupt, and they'll pay visits to them, and either they'll want them to give them money, sort of to bribe them to go away, or they'll also sometimes have their thumb on them, and now they have sort of an entry point to know what's going on, use those resources if they want, which we've seen happen a few times. But they definitely have an interest, because those guys are elite hackers, and we know the world runs on cyber, so it's in their best interest to get those guys to work with them. And if you had to pick between going to prison, going to the front lines in the Russia-Ukraine war, or going to work for the FSB part-time and still doing crimes, what are you going to pick?
Right. Absolutely. So it's almost like, getting back to that mafia analogy, it's almost like the local gangster part of the mafia that will like go to the businesses, right, and demand money for protection, right?
That's
like
right.
You've got to do this, otherwise, your place may burn down. We don't know. right? And it's like the FSB comes in and says, okay, the Western states have an eye on you. Like you're gonna do what you do, but you're gonna help us a little too.
Yeah, that's correct. And there was something funny that happened around Christmas time. One of the guys that we indicted, his last name, I'm probably saying it wrong, Matt Vive. I know him as Boris Wazawaka and other handles that he's used. But he posted to social media a picture of his Christmas tree, and it had all this U.S. Flags and stuff on it. But then at the top of it, it had this large cutout of President Trump's face on it. And I'm not gonna lie, I laughed when I saw it. It was so comical. It was on this tree, and I'm like, this is just crazy. I mean, these guys have no fear. Like they laugh at us, and it sucks. But I laugh because I didn't expect it, not because I'm on their side. Just to be clear, it was just one of those things that was so absurd. I'm like, this is nuts. These guys have no fear of being arrested at all. Like they're posting on social media.
Yeah, exactly. And what's some of their motives for it? Like, I mean, I would think it's kind of obvious. Like, I would think there might not be great opportunity where they live for economic prosperity. And if you go to the dark web, they have like recruitment sites where these guys are like make $10,000 a week, which is a fortune over there, right? That's right. It's not as expensive as where we live generally. And, in terms of what you can do with that, and you can operate with impunity and you can get it fast. It's fast, easy money. They care about what you can do, your individual skills today, not where you went to school, where what type of education, what grades you got, like none of that matters. Can you hack? Can you do this?
That's right. And there's sort of 2 points there. One, some of these guys have made comments and said things to me like, there's not work here. I can't go use my skills to make money to support my family, but I can make a lot of money doing this. And then, I guess the second point, the indicted affiliate, Bastard Lord, he was indicted last year, big time affiliate for Lockbit. He had worked for the Revo ransomware game previously and others. With him, he was like, the first big payment I got was 150,000 cryptocurrency, but he was like, that was life changing for me and my family. It's like I could never make that, and we were barely getting by.
And he's the one whose mom had medical conditions.
That's right.
Right, he had a lot of medical bills, and he was used to working in a factory where he would have to like tape his shoes and barely have a coat.
He was security guard in school with no heat. That's right. Yeah, it was freezing. I couldn't.
I read that on Ransomware Diaries.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So I'm not saying we should feel bad for people, but we're also human
beings. No, but that's their motive. Like that's why.
Yes, like it's good to
but for
understand.
The grace of God, like if I was sitting there, I don't know what I would do. Right? Like you would at least be challenged. Like morality, you would probably steer the right way, but like from circumstance, you're like, well, at least you understand the context of why they're doing it.
Well, it's one thing to be, have an understanding of why someone does it. And let's say that there's a reason that you can even be empathetic to, like, if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would do type of thing. That's one thing. But when they keep doing it and they have all this money and they still keep doing it, that's just being greedy. You're a bad guy. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and who they do it to. There used to be.
That's right.
I mean, it used to almost like, the mafia was always like, hey, we're not going to deal drugs. We're not going to do this. We're just going to do like gambling or whatever. And then they lied about that anyway. They were lying about that anyway. Very similar story to the ransomware gangs where it used to be publicized anyway from them. Hey, we're not going to touch children's hospitals, cancer centers, like places like that. We won't do that. We're just about, some of these big companies, they have all this money. They're just being jerks. It's like a Robin Hood mentality. And then they don't personally have to take accountability because then it's not me doing something bad. It's a noble cause, right?
That's
but
right.
That's not even the case, is it? Like they go after those hospitals.
They go after
Like,
those hospitals, and when I was at DEF CON, I talked about this extensively. But the biggest, sort of the end of my fallout with Lockbit was, when they had attacked St. Anthony's Hospital in Chicago, and it has a children's cancer ward, and because everything was encrypted, they didn't have services. They're going to have to move these kids to another hospital. That's not an easy thing to do. It puts these kids at risk. And I spent an afternoon talking to him about it, and I had naively believed that I could get him to give them back the encryption key. Because at the end of the day, if you're a bad guy, you can still get money by extorting them for their data. Not that I'm condoning it, but I just wanted these kids to be able to get their treatment and other things. And I really thought I could convince him to do that, and I was wrong. And that's what sort of changed the tide. As far as trying to
any
change
empathy
how
you
I.
may have had for
That's
them.
right. That's right. That's right. Yes.
Wow. So you're somebody that has gone undercover and actually spoken with them. Now, let me ask you this. Do they speak English when you're talking to them on these talks channels or on
Yeah,
the dark web?
most of them can speak in at least broken English, because you got to remember,
Or they
almost all
use
the
a
victims.
translator, or they use a translator.
That's right. Yeah, but a lot of them do speak broken English because all their victims are usually English speaking. But yeah, there are occasions where they don't, and then either we use Russian speaking nationals to help with these operations, or you can use a translator, but you're not going to trick anybody using a translator. But I also have talked to these guys just as myself. Once they ransomware diaries kind of put me on the map, and a lot of these guys just
Yep.
at the time wanted to talk to me. So I've done both.
Well, and for
But
those of you
yes.
who may not know, and if I can find the image of it, I will pop it up here. I just don't know if I'm able to find the image. But after one of your initial ransomware diaries where you talked about Lockbit, they read it and they put your face on their website on the dark web of Lockbit.
They
That
made it their
must have been a
avatar.
moment.
Yes.
Yeah, their
Yes.
avatar
On
was
their
your
account.
face.
Yes. Yes.
Like, and
For
they were at the
until
time
yeah,
the
for
number
years. For
one,
years.
yeah, the number one most like wanted, most ruthless, notorious ransomware gang on the planet, and your face is there.
Yeah, I'll never forget that.
That causes
Yes.
that causes some lost sleep.
It does. It does. And then over time, because they kept doing that for I don't know, it was about a year and a half until
Oh my
they got
God.
kicked off the forum. They kept it. So I would see the Lockbit having these arguments with other ransomware
With your
gang
face going
leadership
back and
with
forth.
my face. And you got to be like, at some point, he's got to be guy. Who the hell is the guy I'm looking at? And and then they're probably looking me up and stuff like that. So yeah, it was it made life interesting. Sure.
Yeah, or some federal agents reading that and they don't even know that it's you, and they're doing that. Then they go and get a coffee in Washington and see you, and you're like, hey, I've seen that guy. Like he's a cyber. He must be visiting from Russia. Like
Or other analysts that I know that are also tracking them, and they have to
Right.
see my face every day. Yeah, I've heard it from everybody, but yeah, all the
That's
law enforcement
crazy.
guys know me nowadays. But yeah, but there was a time,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's. I mean, all I can do is laugh about it now, but it definitely
Hey,
made for a funny story after the fact.
I've got a question. So when a ransomware gang threatens to release the data and it goes on their dark website, I've heard business leaders say, well, I don't go to the dark web, nor do my customers. So why would I care? Right? Like,
Right.
but the issue is everybody, even though it's the dark web and most business people don't go there, everybody else does. Like everybody that is involved in security. And so it makes its way to the news and to the mainstream media. Right?
Yes, but I think that mentality is changing because there's been so many cases now. It starts on the dark web, but that's not where it ends. That's just where it starts. That data makes its way out of there, and then it's used not only against those organizations and their customers, but it can also be used to further compromise like their partners who have trusted relationships with them, and it just leads to more and more of this.
Well, and I'm starting to see some of the cybercrime gangs also have things on the clear web or through certain apps. Like you'll see a gang have a website or a page on Telegram and on
Yes.
like regular, which is on the regular web, basically. Like any of us can access that. You don't need the Tor browser and Tails and a VM to get over to the dark web. And then a lot of them also have, like you said earlier, like some of them have social media. Like
That's right.
they're notifying it. And if you still don't pay and you still ignore them, they'll start reaching out to some of
Yeah,
your
they do
customers
interviews.
or your partners.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. No, they'll do that. Yes, they also interview with the media. But yes, they'll reach out. That I've even seen several times now where they've actually hired call centers to read a script and call customers of big companies, telling them that their data has been taken and they need to contact the company and tell them that they need to pay to not have this leaked, which is absurd, right? That actually
That's
takes place.
absurd. That is so like
Yes.
they're complete bullies. Like
Yes.
in the schoolyard, somebody needs to stop that kid. You
I
know what
agree
I
with
mean?
you.
Like
I
it
agree
is
with you.
really brutal. And then if let's say you're in an industry that is regulated, right? They've been
Oh, yeah.
notifying HHS, the SEC, like
Yes.
the organizations, like, and they're like, hey, by the way, we breached them, they haven't notified you yet,
That's
or they're
right.
not being, like, they say we don't have access, we're the guys that did it, we have all the access.
That's right.
That's
And they'll
brutal.
actually use that to extort them. And they'll be like, our extortion demand is less than what you're going to pay in fines and fees if this has to be go public or if we notify them. And so, yes, you're going to have your data leaked. It's going to affect your customer base. It's going to affect your reputation. Your systems
Wow.
might be encrypted. It's going to take a ton of money to fix that. And they're going to report you, even themselves, to these government organizations that track and fine private sector companies. It's a tough place to be in. And I say this all the time. There's no shame in becoming a victim. Anyone can get hacked. I don't care how
Absolutely.
good you are. It's possible. It's how you handle it after the fact. And what I have an
Right.
issue, just as much as I have issues with ransomware bad guys, I have issues with when corporate companies get greedy and they lie, and it's their customers who end up, taking the hit.
Absolutely.
And if they had just been honest and disclosed, things could have happened much smoother, and protections could have tried to have been implemented. But yeah, when they lie about it and they don't tell the public about it, and they say, "Oh, we weren't compromised," in fact they were. It's the consumer who
Which is a
loses.
huge red flag when I see a story of a data breach and like, oh, they didn't access anything, and I'm like, it was freaking Black Cat. They accessed it, or it was
Yes.
Lockbit. Like, I'm telling you, they accessed it, and then 3 months later, you find out the whole story. But
Yes.
it's absolutely brutal. I know Black Cat's not gone. Like, they're gone. They did the exit scam. I didn't mean to use them as an example necessarily.
No, you're fine with that example. It's still relevant.
Yeah, I mean, it's like some of the stories are just phenomenal. And I love the names because it's so good for creating characters. There's like the
It is.
cactus, like dark
Right.
angels. Like, how
Right.
cool is that for a name, the
Right.
dark angels? Like, I threw that name into, I was going to write a article about them. And I'm like, I threw that name into AI, like image generator, and got some really cool images. And I'm like, that their logos and their tattoos are going to be cool. We're the Dark Angels.
Well, I
It's
think
just ridiculous.
the most interesting name was Revil because it was based off of a video game,
Yes.
Resident Evil. I
Yep.
mean, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't it's just, they're all children. Like, we're all children.
Agree with you.
But
Agree.
one thing, tell me what you think of this as we wrap up. Like, would you agree that not all breaches are created equal? Meaning
course.
you see certain breaches and even smaller breaches, but businesses are down for weeks and their system, like, they didn't prepare. Like, and the bad guys were inside those networks for a long time, creating backdoors, gaining all these privileges, exfiltrating data. Like, there's those, and then there's some where, like, yeah, they got it. They had services, or they had some team in place, or they prepared for, like, through incident response planning, and they like triaged immediately, and they took it more seriously. And you see, there's still damage, right? There still happened, right? But I think
That's
it
right.
goes to your point of there's no shame in being a victim, unless you're more of a victim than you should have been had you not been negligent. You know what I
agree
mean?
with
Like,
Yes.
would you agree with that?
100%. I get really upset when I hear about like that example I gave, where organization still had a default password set on public facing infrastructure.
Yeah.
When companies should have more of a responsibility to protect our data. Yes, anybody can be hacked, but when you are, just it's ridiculous, and you don't take through the basic things that you should be doing to protect people, and you have their data, and they either don't have a choice, they have to either allow you to use it or they don't. There should be more repercussions for those situations. There are victims that do everything right. They should do is still get compromised, but the ones who don't, where it's just incredible to me that takes place. And those are the companies that they should have penalties and they should have punishments. It's not okay. And then one other thing I just wanted to bring up, there's also, in my opinion, these companies that pay, like Change Healthcare, for example, great
Oh my
example.
God.
They paid
Yeah.
twice. They paid $22 million
Yes.
allegedly twice. And
That's the Black Hat story, isn't it? Like where they paid,
yes.
and but then Black Hat said, "Oh no, we're taken down, like we're out of business," and they ran away. They took the money, and then the actual affiliate is still there going, "Hey, I don't know what just happened. They just ripped me off of my commission on this.
Yes.
I still have your data. I'm still going to do the exact same thing that they were going to do." He went back to them, and they had to pay again.
Yes, and the problem is that money, it feeds that ecosystem. It encourages them to do more attacks, and I feel like there's got to be a responsibility of some of these companies. Like it's ridiculous. Now, I'll admit that when I see something like that
It's
in a
hard to
healthcare
make sure
company,
that they've actually deleted the data. It's hard to make sure that they've actually
they don't.
deleted the
I
data,
know for
right?
a fact that they don't delete the data.
Yeah.
That is a myth, and these companies that believe it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've had the conversations. There's black and white evidence that they don't delete the data. You're a fool. You're paying for them not to publish your data now and hoping that a criminal keeps their word. But it doesn't happen.
Wow.
We have these takedown events. There is almost always data from previous
Prior
entities
breaches.
that it was supposed to be deleted, and it's still there.
Yeah. What is the average percentage right now of people that once they pay a ransom, they actually get the decrypt key and they're able to restore their data?
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't,
actually pretty
it
good.
doesn't solve the fact that they might have taken a copy of it and could still release it. But in terms of getting back up and running,
Yeah, most of the ransomware groups, the successful ones anyway, they treat it like a business, and they know if they have the reputation of just taking your money and not doing what they say, that future victims won't pay. So most of them
Right.
will actually abide by that. But the point is, they keep your data, and then when things go south and their enterprise is interrupted, their operation is interrupted, that's what they have left now to use to still obtain financial gain. Is they can sell that to other criminals, they can re-blackmail the company. There's all sorts of scenarios. But at the end of the day, like I said, even when companies do things right, it's still that money that's spent on all this to fix this or to get it to the extortion or whatever it is. At the end of the day, that falls on the consumers, that it's put into the pricing, and you end up paying for it, or people lose their jobs. I mean, it's the little guys and girls that end up getting hurt in this. And that's not as traceable when you just look at the incidents, so it's not as apparent, but that's the reality of what happens.
That's amazing. Well, John DiMaggio, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for what you do for U.S. businesses, U.S. organizations, U.S. critical infrastructure. Honestly, like what you do, you are serving the country. Like nobody probably ever tells you that, but I'm really, really glad to be your buddy and to highlight the things that you're doing. If people want to find John, check out Analyst One, look up Ransomware Diaries. I'll throw a link in the show notes.
Check. I see it behind you.
Oh, of course. I
always
completely forgot the book right there. The Art of Cyber Warfare, which is a really good book. I'll tell you, if you're not technical, right, and you don't want to get into the technical aspect, most of that book still talks about the espionage and the people and everything else. Because I'm not technical, and part of it I was like Googling all these acronyms and all this other stuff, but then I learned something there. But you don't even have to do that. Just the stories in there are phenomenal. Like that's a really, really good book.
I try to write and make things entertaining to read and understandable by a larger audience than just technical people, because I think it's important that that everyone can understand what's taking place, and you don't have to have an engineering degree to get the idea of what's actually happening.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm a former prosecutor back a long time ago, right? And I remember that the detectives that I knew that would go undercover in some of the gangs, they'd get burnt out. It would really
Yeah.
take a toll on their, like, it's hard to be a bad guy and not get caught and not get your cover blown. It's just a lot.
Yeah, that's
So,
me right now. That's where I feel
yeah,
after
it's
doing two
got to
years of
be
this.
like, does it wane on you? Like, it's got
It
to get
does.
to you.
Well, I'm done with that operation with Lockbit and all of those guys, and like that's why I said I'm taking a break from the ransomware diaries. I'm going to do some academic stuff. Like I just need a break. Like it takes an unbelievable toll,
It's
and it's
got
hard
to.
to convey that on your
It's
shoulders. It doesn't
twenty-four
isn't going to stop
seven
me,
fight or
but
f-
it's
yeah,
there.
it's isn't it? It's like 24/7 fight or flight mode. You're on
That's right.
amygdala hijack 24/7, and it takes a toll on you.
It does. It's high pressure, high anxiety. It affects you, your family, the people around you, all of that stuff. So
Yeah,
there's no vacation, especially when you're pretending to be somebody you're not. There's no 9 to 5. There's no weekends. Like you're that other person. You can't just
right.
be like, I'm taking off. Sorry. So yeah,
No,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
well, thank you for what you do and the sacrifice that you made
Thank you.
there.
I
But
appreciate
dear
it.
God, just go teach some kids how to like
Right.
break into cyber. Like just take it
Right.
easy a little bit. Like
Yeah. That's the
um
plan.
yeah. Hey, let me ask you the latest on Lockbit, just as in the final moments, what like the last we spoke, the head of Lockbit's up. They were like gonna release the feds were gonna release the identity. There was like geolocation found of where this person was. He
Yeah.
kept telling you that's not me. They got the wrong guy. They got the wrong guy.
They
It
always
was
say that.
him.
Yeah.
It
That's
was
right.
him, and we know exactly where he is, and
Right.
pictures of him and everything, and the stuff he liked, right? Like the sports he liked, the cars he liked, where he liked to shop, all that
Gardening.
stuff.
Yes.
Yes. I loved it was like a Southern Charm magazine expose
Right.
on like Martha Stewart. And I'm like, this
Right.
guy's ruthless. And we're like,
Right.
yeah, he loves to garden and his
Right.
favorite like cognac. And I'm like, what? Oh
Right.
my God. It was
That's
great.
right.
So what's the latest with that? Is it still just it's just in plateau phase because you can't go arrest them. Like you can't go get them,
Yes,
right?
that's right. You can't. So
Yeah.
since then, their developer has been he's actually been arrested because he was
Yeah,
outside of Russia.
I saw that. Yeah,
Yeah,
and he
so
had
he was
pictures
arrested.
on social media. He had
He
pictures on
did.
social media, like at the
He
beach,
did.
smoking, all that stuff.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yep, relaxing.
Yeah.
That's right. So he was arrested. So the operation itself, on paper and what's in a lot of news headlines and statistics, makes it look like they're still one of the top one or two groups. But for a trained eye, they're posting a lot of fictitious victims or victims that were previously extorted and breached. And they're also posting victims from other groups, because they're affiliates who do it, other groups that they've worked for and done it. So they're sort of stacking the deck. Now there are still legitimate breaches, but they have 100% taken a hit and are feeling the pain because of the sanctions. It makes it hard for victims to pay. So if you're a bad guy, why would you work for them and deal with all that hassle when you can go to somebody else? So they're your top tier hacker affiliates. That's not going to be their first choice of where to go. And Lockbit is trying to come back, and he's releasing in a couple of weeks. He's releasing a new program, updating it from Lockbit 3.0 to Lockbit 4.0. And there's a lot of headlines about that. But here's what people aren't reporting: when they NCA, so that's made up of like Europol, the FBI, a bunch of law enforcement organizations worldwide. When they took them down, they obtained the source code for this new variant that's going to come out. So it's being marketed and it's being reported like it's going to like this big comeback, but I don't think that it will be as big as things have been with them in the past. Again, because law enforcement has obtained that code, which makes it easier to defend against. I'm not saying that it's not going to be effective at all, but it's not going to be what we saw in June of 2022 when Lockbit 3.0 came out and it changed the whole dynamic of ransomware forever. It's not like that. I don't think it will be. Time will tell. But I believe that they'll
Excellent.
keep being out there doing their PR and trying to get their name out there. But I think they'll continue to diminish. But time will tell.
Wow. Who are the big players out there now? Black Matter, Black
Ransom. So
Best.
Black
Oh,
Matter's
I'm
gone.
sorry.
That's
Ransom Hub. Ransom
Yeah,
Hub.
Ransom Hub's one of the big ones that are out there. There's a lot of groups from, if you remember the Conti ransomware group,
Of
when
course.
when that ended, they broke up into many different
Ton of them.
groups. And
Yep.
that is a model that we're kind of seeing more of. And that's what I'm actually working on right now, is looking at sort of Black Cat. They went away, and we're seeing now a couple different groups that have a lot of code similarities, that have a lot of the same people working for them. It's not a one for one, but we have to stop looking at things as a group goes away, there's a rebrand, and they're the same group. Well, no, they're actually now
It's
becoming multiple
splinters.
groups.
It's splinters,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And they're
That's right.
different groups.
Which
Yeah.
makes it hard to track, hard to get your mind around, and
Yeah.
hard to do attribution on correctly. So it's difficult. That's actually what my next paper is going to be on how to do proper attribution. I'm going to do a use case to show that.
Excellent.
But anyway, they give me lots of good
Very
content
cool.
for examples for a use case.
Prime's always up. So,
It
all right,
is,
man. Hey, thank you
unfortunately.
so much for your time. I really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Always great insight. We'll have links. Please connect with John. Follow him on LinkedIn. You and your team at Analyst One are phenomenal, and everything you do is
Thank you.
just outstanding. So,
Well, I really appreciate
brother.
it. Thank you.
have a great
Absolutely.
weekend. I will talk to you soon.
You
Okay.
too.
Thanks, man.
Sounds good, Dave. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on Breaching the Boardroom. Join me in my pursuit of growth anywhere you listen to your podcast. For technology tips and tricks and leadership hacks, find me on LinkedIn. And don't forget to send me a DM or leave a comment on a topic you want me to cover next. This podcast is powered by NetGain Technologies, a top 250 internationally ranked managed security services provider headquartered in Lexington, Kentucky, with offices across the Southeast and Midwest.